right, friends, Greg Koukl here, and the show is Stand to Reason. I'm your host. Glad you joined me today. We just kind of coming off about a 3-hour jaunt with a great group of people visiting from Norway, and this happens every year. So one person's face is familiar every year, but she brings a new group of people every time, and we had a great time eating Mexican food. And I guess they do have Mexican food in Norway, but it's the like the traditional Norway Mexican food style. But they got the real thing from what was that place they went to? We got it and catered it out. It was really great, and we got a chance to talk about a lot of stuff. Now, I don't think that they are fans of this show. Not that they're against it, but didn't know about it. So maybe after today, they'll start listening to it. Easy to podcast anywhere in the world, if you like. But during our conversation, we actually did, Amy and I did a show for them. That is, they have their own podcasts in Norway. And so we kind of had a little mic we passed around and a little recording device, which was an iPhone and very high tech, but apparently it was working pretty well. And so we had a great conversation, and something came out during the conversation that Amy said that I actually don't remember Amy ever saying before, but she said she's told me, but she's probably right, because most of the things I've been told before I don't remember, especially at this stage of my life. But it had to do with a question about bioethics and in vitro fertilization. Now, you know what that is. That's where you can use technology and your own sperm and egg to have them joined in a petri dish in vitro, and then have them implanted in mom's body, and then have a child if it's been difficult for a couple to have children in the past. And the question is, or was, do we think that this is a morally acceptable way to go? And it's a fair question because there are lots of issues kind of on the fringe here that have to do with biotechnology that Christians are asking, and they want to make sure that their decisions on these issues are properly, biblically, and theologically informed, and that's really important. And there's also different views on this. And in fact, in my case, my wife and I, we got married late. I had my birthday and my 48th birthday on my honeymoon, so that's called late blooming. And my wife was 8 years younger, and so we were kind of like in a gray area there, but we still managed to get pregnant after 4 years, and then we lost that baby. And then it was really hard. And so what we decided to do is to do in vitro fertilization, and we were able to inseminate 3 embryo, make that 3 eggs, to become embryos that then were implanted. And of course, our view on this was that if you, we weren't opposed to the technology per se, although I realize that some are, Roman Catholicism in particular, characteristically, is opposed for their reasons, not taking exception with that, but they're not my reasons and it's not my view. And so we were willing to give a shot at this particular means. We only had 3 eggs fertilized and therefore implanted all 3 embryos, because if they all survived, my wife could carry triplets. And so that was the way we did it. We didn't make 20 of them and, hope for the best and then not know what to do with the rest just in case, That's a concern ethically, and that was our procedure. But the embryos died. Then we adopted embryos from somebody else's in vitro fertilization, and those didn't make it either. So in principle here, I wasn't opposed to the process or the technology, use of the technology itself. Now, what was interesting for me is Amy had a different point of view, and she used to hold the view that I held. But now as she's seen, and this is a completely fair observation, she's seen the dehumanization of the entire process technologically now, or that's happening as a result of things like in vitro fertilization, that has grown into almost making a commodity out of children. And now women might agree to be artificially inseminated with another couple's child to bear that child and then give that child back to the genetic parents, even though she was the one who bore it. Now, I'm not in favor of that practice. I'm just making the point, though. Now, this has become a commodity. The ability to do this has commodified, made children into products. And that has a deleterious effect on the way we as a culture view human beings and human value. Okay? So this is the point that she was making. And so consequently, she's not in favor of in vitro fertilization because of the impact that it has down the line on the way it influences the cultural understanding of what it means to be human and human value. It's a great point. And it's actually a great illustration of a particular way of reasoning morally. Now, you've probably heard of slippery slope arguments or slippery slope points that are made. Well, if you do this, then something else is going to happen. You're down the slippery slope. And there are a lot of times that appeals are made to slippery slopes that are simply not sound. They're not legitimate. And when that appeal is made, some people say, well, that's just the old slippery slope fallacy, because one thing doesn't always lead to another. Just because you start at one place doesn't mean you're going to necessarily slip down. It's not. There's no connection between the first and the last, is the point. And therefore, that kind of reasoning is fallacious. But there are actually two ways to reason about a slippery slope, and both of them were discussed in our conversation today, that are not fallacious. They are legitimate. And Amy was giving an example. The kind of slippery slope she was referring to was a causal slippery slope. And what that means is that sometimes there are behaviors that you participate in, which behavior is not in itself immoral. Taken in isolation, it's not a problem. And in the case of my wife and I, when we had in vitro fertilization, had two of them actually, the way we did it, and that was not successful in giving us children. We ended up adopting both of our girls. But in isolation, what we did was not immoral. In the first case, we were using our embryos and only enough that could, in principle, survive at once in a birth. My wife could carry triplets. And in the second case, these were embryos in deep freeze, and we're looking for a home. And so we were providing them with an opportunity at life, and that's what ought to be done with frozen embryos, because they are human beings in limbo, so to speak, inert at the moment because they're frozen, that should be given a chance at life. Okay? So from my perspective, the action itself wasn't wrong. However, if a good action has the consequence, the result, the impact on something else that is morally significant, then the moral impropriety of the consequence of the amoral action slips into the amoral action. So you could say, because this amoral thing, if that's your view, that's my view at least, of in vitro fertilization, leads to a commodification of human beings, then that's a consequence that follows from the behavior, and the moral quality of the consequence slips over into the behavior. And so this is why Amy's view now is she's not even in favor of in vitro fertilization of any kind. Embryo adoption, yes, because those human beings are already made, and they're just waiting for a warm home, so to speak, pun intended. But when it comes to in vitro, she says no, in virtue of a causal slippery slope. One thing that may not be immoral in itself leads to other behaviors. And as long as you can show a causal relationship, a link there, it is not a slippery slope fallacy. There may be other things like this that you could imagine if one thing is not morally suspect, but the practice of it leads to moral harm. That raises an issue of the action itself. Okay, that's a causal slippery slope. Now, part of our conversation had to do also with the way abortion has influenced the way we think about things. Now, and that also could be called a commodification of human beings, because the arguments in favor of abortion are grounded largely in the fact that the unborn, whether you call the unborn a zygote or an embryo or a fetus or whatever you call it, those are all human terms that we get to stages of development of exactly the same thing. All a zygote is a brand new human being. All an embryo is that same human being a little bit further developed, and a fetus even further developed, and a child further developed, and a teenager much further developed. You see, these are just terms that we use to describe stages of development of an individual human being. They are not separate things in themselves. You say, well, it's a zygote. Yeah, but what kind of zygote? It's a human zygote. It's a fetus. What kind of fetus? It's a human fetus. It's a human being at a zygote stage of development as we characterize it, and it's a human being at a fetal stage of development as we characterize it. These are just terms that we have arbitrarily given to different stages to make it convenient to talk about the development of that individual human from the instant it comes into existence at conception until that human's natural death. We have all kinds of these, some prenatal, some postnatal, like I mentioned. Toddler, child, teenager, middle-ager, old guy, that kind of thing. So then, now the question then here is, since we have begun thinking or characterizing, this is a better way of putting it, defining the unborn as a piece of property owned by the mother, and there are different ways that she might characterize it. The standard way, most frequent way, has to do with bodily autonomy. It's my body, my choice. Well, strictly speaking, we know it's not her body entirely. Well, let me put it this way. It is her body entirely plus another human body entirely. There is a human being domiciled inside of mom that is growing there where that child, that human being, belongs. And mom's helping that to grow. But the tendency nowadays, essentially since Roe v. Wade, 50-some years ago, even though legally that's been changed, nevertheless, people still think in much the same way. My body, my choice. And I can do whatever I want with my body. And even if you make the case that the unborn is not her body, it's got a different DNA, it may have a different sex, et cetera, et cetera. I mean, that's science. Nevertheless, there still is this ownership mentality, okay? Now, if we buy the idea that the mother is the owner of her offspring, that creates a logical connection with other things. If the mother owns the child or her offspring at the earliest stages, it's still hers at later stages of development. And if it becomes, say, appropriate to take the life of that child because mom says it's all right because she owns that child, and that can be done just up until the time of birth, why is birth a relevant, distinctive moment? What about 5 minutes after birth? The only difference is that the baby is located somewhere else, one inside the womb and the other outside. It's the same baby, though, at the same stage of development, the same individual. And if it's okay then to, in virtue of that ownership argument, if it's okay to destroy that child inside the womb, and some will argue at virtually any stage of development, then why is it wrong to destroy the same child just outside of the womb, since location is morally inconsequential? And so the logic, watch this now, the logic that supports abortion inside of the womb equally supports abortion outside of the womb. And although we don't call it abortion, or not characteristically, but that language has changed. And many, many years, it must have been 30 years ago, when I was at KBRT doing commercial radio, I talked about this. And pretty soon I said, what we're going to have is what they call postnatal abortion. We'll call it abortion, but it's going to be after the birth of the child. Infanticide, in fact. But if people are already geared to thinking of abortion as an appropriate way of dealing with an unborn child in utero, and ex utero is no meaningful moral distinction, child ex utero to one in utero is not, there's no meaningful moral distinction there, then why not outside? Why not in what we call infanticide? Well, that is called a logical slippery slope. And it's logical because the logic that justifies the abortion at these in utero stages is just the very same logic that, if applied consistently, will justify abortion outside of the uterus after birth. And it's interesting that a number of years after I made that prediction, I said it's coming. There was an article written in a philosophical journal by some Italian philosophers, and they were arguing this exact point. I talked about it on the air when it happened, kind of I told you so moment, unfortunately. But that's the logic. But they didn't call it postnatal abortion. That's what I thought it would be called. They called it afterbirth abortion, which strikes me as odd because that's, and just in terms of like optics or narrative or whatever, after birth is after birth. And if you refer to this as afterbirth abortion, it doesn't make your thing sound good. Postnatal, my term, postnatal abortion, sound better. If I were them, I would have adopted that instead. But nevertheless, they were arguing the same way. And in virtue of a logical slippery slope, if it's okay, and these are the reasons that make it okay to abort or take the life of an unborn, of that child inside the womb, and going outside of the womb, changing location is morally inconsequential, then why would it be wrong to commit the same thing with the child outside of the womb, infanticide? Lots of people have argued this, by the way. Peter Singer, he's arguing a logical slippery slope. And if the reasoning is good on the first half, it goes through in the second half. Now, it also works in reverse when you think about it. If you look at the unborn and you countenance the idea of a newborn baby and you think to yourself, you can't kill a newborn baby. That's not right. Well, if it isn't right, then how is it okay to kill the exact same baby at the exact same stage of development when that baby has just moved a few inches over inside the uterus? If it's not right on the outside, it should not be right on the inside. And so now the logical slippery slope can slip back the other direction. Anyway, my point here was just to make the point that that there are slippery slope fallacies, and there are also ways of employing slippery slopes that are appropriate. One, as I mentioned, is a causal slippery slope, and I gave the details of that, and the other is a logical slippery slope. And there's a lot of those in play, by the way. And it's actually a version of the tactic in the tactics book called taking the roof off. And the whole point there is, look, if this are the rules you're going to play by, these rules have logical implication for other applications. And if the logic is good in one place, it ought to be good in another place. And that's exactly how those arguments work. Anyway, hope that's helpful. Time for a break, and then we got calls we'll come to when I return at Stand to Reason. All right, friends, just a quick update. We have a brand new STRU class called Worldview Conversation Series, okay? It's 4 short, simple courses. The instructors are Tim Barnett, a.k.a. Mr. B of Red Pen Logic, Alan Schleman here at Stand to Reason, of course, so is Tim, and Robbie Lashua, late of Stand to Reason, who made these classes a couple months ago, or maybe before that, since I guess last year. No, but in any event, these are great classes that will help you understand how worldviews work and how to evaluate competing worldviews. And you can look at the teachings of LDS friends, Jehovah's Witnesses, Muslims, and how they differ from Christianity at the foundation of the worldview, and also how to ask clarifying questions in those conversations. You can find that, of course, at str.org/training/worldviews, and that'll bring you right to the class. Update now on our progress with the realities coming up. We have 3 more this spring. 3 weeks from now, we're opening Dallas. That's the first one of the spring. Dallas holds almost 3,000 people. There's 100, and let me look at this number, my bad writing, 194 seats left in Dallas. So we got 3 weeks. We're going to fill that up. And by the way, that's all overflow, just so you know. 194. Now, 7 weeks from now, we'll be at Philly. That's March 13th and 14th. The Dallas is February 20th and 21st. In March, mid-March, we'll be in Philly. There are only 16 seats left. That is almost completely sold out, 7 weeks before the event. That's a good sign. Now, Southern Cal, April 24th and 25th, we got lots of room. We've got close to 300 seats sold of a 2,500, the main auditorium. So that's going to be at Calvary Chapel Downey, I think, the 24th and 25th of April. But in any event, there's still room in each one if you move quickly, especially in Philly. 16 seats left. That's what I heard this morning. I don't know what's going on now. Maybe they're gone. But just go to realityapologetics.com, realityapologetics.com, and it has the skinny on every single location. And keep in mind, too, that the Dallas event is going to be live streamed. So you can arrange for live streaming. All the information there is on the website. So it's a great series this year. And the last one, by the way, that J. Warner Wallace is going to be part of our team. He's been at so many in the past. He's just moving in a different direction. We can't snag him for 6 more times next year. Okay, so, and he's also a granddad. Spent a lot of time with his grandchildren. Good for him. So this will be your last chance to see J. Warner Wallace, at least on one of our venues. And he'll be giving a number of talks from the main stage and also on breakout sessions, along with Jason Jimenez and me and Alan and Tim and the whole Stand to Reason crew. So the Almonds will be there, of course, Tripp and Megan. So hope you can make it. Once again, realityapologetics.com. All right, let's go to the phones in Granbury, Texas. We have Craig. Craig, I'm glad you called. Hi.
Hey, Greg. How you doing?
I'm doing good. Are you on a speaker right now, or are you on the phone?
No, I'm on the phone. I just took it off speaker.
Okay,
yeah.
Got it. Yeah.
Yeah.
What's up?
Yeah. Well, one, just trying to stay a little bit warm. We've been iced in the past 5 days. This wonderful front that's come through. So, but anyway, yeah, been a lot of fun. Anyway, I have a question about, I guess, one of the tactical question, and this is in reference to your interview that you had on the Diary of the CEO.
Right.
And my job has me driving a lot, like over 1,200 miles a week. So translation, I get to listen to a lot of podcasts.
I'll say.
And I listened/watched that thing front and back twice because I wanted to make sure I got everything correct on it.
Well, that's 3 hours and 20 minutes times 2. Good for you.
Yes. It was, yeah. Well, it was determined because really that conversation right there you brought, there was, at least by my estimation, there was no other possible consideration of a worldview that would explain reality. You had yours, you had Alex's, and then you had the good doctor there.
Yeah.
But anyway, the one thing that I found kind of, I guess, say disheartening, which I'm sure you did too, at the end was ultimately, it seemed to me it went nowhere. And my question is, tactfully, how fruitful would that conversation go if you would have said something to the effect of, I'm going to ask my question, but this is scripted so I can keep it tight and pithy.
Sure,
so,
okay.
Or it goes, I said, if you would have said something like, look, fellas, we weren't invited here to come here just to, play show and tell with their toys and go home. Many of Stephen's listeners are hurting, lost, confused, and are seeking the answer to life's biggest questions.
Uh-huh.
And for the past 3 to 4 hours, we've been talking about possibilities, probabilities, plausibilities, yada, yada, yada. Now, how about we evaluate not an answer, but the answer that applies to all people? See, Greg, have put forth the best and most comprehensive explanation for the nature of reality. Alex admits he doesn't know, or at least doesn't find the available evidence compelling enough. Well, okay, very well. And I guess with all due respect, Dr. Timothy Leary here just ultimately says just drop some acid and something has to happen. And
Timothy Leary.
I know anyone under 50
I get the joke. All right,
it
goes back. He would be back from the dead, but he's the psychedelic from the 60s, right? And he actually committed suicide. He when he committed suicide, he was on an acid trip. It was kind of a combination of all that. But in any event, so go ahead and finish.
Yeah, and I was just going to finish it off and just say, at the end there, like toward the last few moments, the good doctor there, by his lengthy talking points, was saying, I don't know the answer. You don't know the answer. Nobody knows that answer because that answer could not be known. And if it could be known, I, the good doctor, would know it because I've got all these PhDs and HQSO4s after my name. So how would it have gone if you had done something like that?
Well, first of all, everybody on that panel, with the exception of Stephen Bartlett, who is the host of Diary of a CEO, DOAC, and discussing this question. For those who are not familiar with this interview, it was in September. It was early September that we had the interview, and then mid-September when it was aired. And the question was about meaning and significance. And so many people lack meaning and significance. We were, as a panel, going to explore the question. So you have the Christian theist, that would be me. You have Alex O'Connor, who's arguably the best-known atheist in the world right now and only 26 years old. And then you had who we call Dr. K, who was the psychoanalyst Hindu guru type, who also made some reference to magic mushrooms, and that was the Timothy Leary kind of reference you made. But so these were three different perspectives on this question, and my whole strategy for that time was to make the point that you identified as, like, we have the answer. There is an answer to this, and and each of those people, though, even when you say, charitably, oh well, we don't know, they think they know. Alex O'Connor thinks he knows there is no God. Now he may not be sure. He certainly believes there is no God, and Dr. K, he was pretty confident in his proclamations about what he spoke on, and I the same. So we all have confidence that our views are actually true, okay? But the question then becomes, how do we know that? And so I'm thinking strategically about the whole meeting, and I want to, since the question is about meaning and purpose, in my view, meaning comes first and purpose second. You got to know who you are and what you are, etc., before you know what your purpose is in the grand scheme of things. And it turns out both of the people who have their own views, even the guy with the kind of Eastern thing, ultimately he was saying, I'm not making any proclamations about capital T truth. I'm just going to help you as a psychologist, etc., feel better about where you're at. And that was basically the same thing that Alex O'Connor offered. And when he was asked point blank towards the end, and this made it in the final cut, Alex, if somebody came to you and told you they don't feel they have any meaning and purpose in life, what would you say to them? And
go to church.
Well, yeah, he said, he basically, I mean, to sum it up, he did say, well, go to church or take drugs, or read a book in philosophy. Those were his three options. But the point he was making is, and it was kind of almost like this as I'm looking at him responding, it's like, why are you asking me this question? I'm an atheist. I don't think there is any meaning and purpose. And so if somebody wants to feel better, then do something to make you feel better. It's like Karl Marx says religion is the opiate of the people, right? Okay, then find whatever your opium is. Go to church or take drugs. And this is where I wish I would have paused. And, in the fog of war, you miss these opportunities, and afterwards you see them. And I wish I would have just narrated what just took place, and I would have said something like this. And by the way, there were a number of times where I was dropping back, to 30,000 feet, so to speak, and trying to help people see what's going on. And either there is purpose or there isn't purpose. There is meaning or there is no meaning. Let's put it that way. If there's no ultimate meaning, you can choose whatever purpose you want. It's a crapshoot, whatever. But that would make Mother Teresa no better, no worse than Hitler. Do it at whatever turns you on kind of deal. That's all you're left with. And I think this is kind of where Alex, understandably, got himself into a little box. I don't know. Why are you asking me? I'm the atheist. I don't believe in this stuff. So whatever, makes your clock tick kind of thing. And that's when I wish I would have said, I just want to make an observation about your response, Alex. Here we are having a meeting to discuss the significant question of meaning and purpose. And when you are asked, what's your antidote for a person who doesn't have meaning and purpose, your answer is, I have no antidote, I'm an atheist. Do something that will make you feel better, because that's the best you can do. And I wish I would have made that more clear. I think it was clear to viewers, but it would have been helpful from a strategic perspective to narrate that and then make the point, as I did at different times in different ways, that there is an answer. There's a reason that we're asking the question. And we're asking the question because we know we were made for a purpose. That's why we're asking what it is. If we weren't made for a purpose, if we didn't have inherent meaning in our lives, we would not be having this conversation. You wouldn't have young people all over the world that are saying, what is the meaning of life? Because animals don't ask that question. There is no meaning to them. That's not part of their deal. We are asking that question. And this is evidence, and I used a form of Lewis's argument from desire as a foil here for this point. We have this desire because there is something for us to find. Now, Alex tried to dismiss that argument with just appealing to evolution, but that misses the point of the argument. The argument isn't that we developed the point is, he said, we have the desire because there's food, and evolution has caused us to blah, 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 this and this, and we eat and we survive, something like that. But the point is, and Lewis's point, and mine, and I could have maybe come back and underscored this a little bit better at that point, was that if we have a desire, it is evidence that there is a satisfaction in principle for the desire. Food is an example. Thirst is an example. We have a hunger for justice. Why do we have that? The justice isn't done in this world. Well, then it's probably done in another world. This is the way Lewis argued. But anyway, I'm just saying, look, the fact that we are searching for this thing, that's teleological itself. It implies that we are moving towards a goal and we're trying to discover what that goal is. So, I mean, I was kind of doing the best I could after I saw the whole, after I did the 5 hours and 15 minutes of recording, I was exhausted, but I was a little bit frustrated, disappointed, because there were points that I wish I had made that I wasn't able to make, and I ended up not being part of a lot of the discussion because I thought a lot of the discussion was not useful for our question. But on the basic, though, is what both of them were arguing is find something that makes you feel a certain way. Because there is no objective meaning, capital M. There is no objective truth, capital T, that gives us meaning. Actually, Alex, he does believe in capital T truth, atheism, and that there is no meaning in atheism. There's only whatever you want to do to make that happen. So that's kind of how that part went for me in the midst of that discussion.
Yeah, I'm sure it's so easy to sit back 6 months after the fact and armchair quarterback the thing, but that was just it's just trying to for any time I come up with a future discussion of that ilk.
Yeah.
And I guess it would depend on how well I know the people that I'm with. If
sure,
it's total strangers,
there's a lot of factors. But there's nothing wrong with doing the armchair thing. I think it's good. It's a good exercise. I did it, in fact, after the fact, and so did my team members, and we worked together. And actually, Tim Barnett and I did a series of podcasts where I should have said this, kind of deal, and we played the clips, and then we responded not under the pressure of the moment, but having reflected on that. So armchair quarterbacking is fine because it'll teach you how to respond more effectively next time.
Right. And now kind of for a pastoral offshoot of this, after it was over, and after everyone was basically going home, the lights were off, cameras were off, did you ever get to have a moment alone with Alex as kind of like a granddad-grandson type of interaction? Because I noticed...
Who's the granddad in this scenario?
Because I noticed that the last, 15 minutes or so, when you, I guess it wasn't so much a closing statement, but closing thoughts, I guess.
Yeah.
He was really paying attention to you. His eyes were fixated on you. Like his gears were going, and I don't know if it was he's trying to fight against what he already knows is true is what you're saying, or he's trying to formulate some rebuttal to it. But anyway, usually it's been, when all the eyes and the pressure off, it's like, look, it's just you and me. It's like, Alex, do you really believe your worldview?
Right. So I wish I had that opportunity. I'll tell you what happened right afterwards as we all got up, obviously, and getting ready to, kind of close down and winding down. And I went over to Alex and I asked him to go to dinner with us. And I was there with my wife and also Greg Koukl, who's our videographer, and he was taking a lot of shots from different angles. He wasn't in the studio, but he was doing B-roll and little interview things with me just to provide a film record of what we did.
Uh-huh.
And it turned, and he said, well, I'd like to, but I have to get on a plane right now, go back across the pond, because tomorrow morning I have another one of these things. I did get his personal email though, and I sent him a note and whatever, and I think had he been available, I think there's a good chance that he would have went to dinner with us, and that's when I would have had that conversation, something akin to that. Not what do you really believe, because I think he was given his honest beliefs, but there is a sense that when 8 cameras in that case are rolling for over 5 hours, you're posturing. Everybody's posturing a bit with regards to their role, even me. I'm trying to make the case as a Christian. I'm not trying to be inauthentic, but I'm still making my case. And I think that when you're by yourself, having dinner or whatever, then the dynamic is going to be different. And then I could have a more personal conversation with him about certain things. Now, I know that he thinks that Christianity is a lot more plausible than he used to think when he was kind of at least intellectually palling with the so-called new atheists. He's rejected that whole enterprise. And I know this because he's talked about it since then. There's a clip that was sent to me. I haven't seen the whole thing, but where he's saying, hey, look at... This is more plausible than a lot of things. The issue of the resurrection has plausibility. I have difficulty with the resurrection accounts, he might say, and I'd have some time to talk with him personally about that. Where what I'm trying to think of the right word, face is not an issue, as in saving face, where you've got to posture a certain way for the cameras and be confident in everything. But he is fairly transparent. Even that day on a number of things. He is mystified by consciousness. he's reaching out to kind of a Jungian sense of consciousness, as if this is going to make some sense or whatever. But he's mystified by that. Now we have a great answer there. How do you solve the mind-body problem? Easy. There is a mind and there's a body. It's just the way everything seems. It's exactly the way things seem. In any event, so I would have pursued some of those things on a more private basis. He did say he gets out to California, Los Angeles area with some frequency. Maybe we can set something up. I sent a response email to him after the event, just saying, nice meeting you, blah, 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 that kind of stuff. And I'd love to look you up and take you up on that, offer that I gave you. Not take you up, but I'll take you out and we'll spend some time. So nothing since then, except for that one video. And I don't know how much what I said was having an influence on him. I really don't have a sense of that. Maybe he was paying attention at the end in a way he wasn't before. I was, as I recall, I was looking at Stephen, who asked me the kind of concluding questions, and I was just trying to leave a strong point, having made a strong point. And what was interesting about the ending, and so I wasn't looking at Alex. What was interesting about the ending for me was that I got a chance to say what felt like my concluding remarks, and I think I did all right with that, pulling it all together. Don't remember what I said, but that was what I was after there. And then he said, okay, Alex, your concluding remarks. Okay, Dr. K, your concluding remarks. Now, Greg, your concluding remarks. I thought I just made them, so I'm glad I got a second chance. And then I gave an entirely different answer. I mentioned what come to be known as, I think, the skeptic's prayer. That is, if people are thinking about this, and some things that were said here pique their curiosity, and they're genuinely interested in what the truth is, they can pray this prayer, and the prayer is very simple. It's something to the order of, God, if you're real, show yourself to me. Jesus, if you're real, show yourself to me. Something like that. I know lots of people have prayed a prayer like that, and it bore fruit. And I prayed a prayer like that in the summer of 1973 in a field at Fort Lewis, Washington. And it was right after that a whole bunch more stuff started to happen that ended up drawing me into the kingdom that fall, September 28th, 1973. So that was my kind of parting shot. But notice I was making an existential appeal, not an evidential one. I was speaking to the heart, the person. I said, just pray this prayer, ask God. And I hope that God used that in people's lives. I don't know. But I felt like I got to make two closing remarks, as it turned out, and I was glad to do so.
Yeah. No, it's...
So a lot to learn from that, but and it's still going on. These things are still pieces and bits and pieces are showing up at different places, and I got a number of interviews after that from a number of people. So Nate Sala interviewed me, Tim interviewed me, Elisa Childers interviewed Melissa Doherty, so I kind of did the rounds there with friends of mine who are influencers in order to have stretch that out and say more about that issue, but just trusting God with it.
Yeah, that whole interview, I think it did kick every rabbit and chase every dog, so to speak.
Yeah.
And
even though with all that time, there's all kinds of loose threads, and there's all kinds of, I wish I would have said this or that or whatever, but, that's the way it always goes. And that's why it's so important that whatever the nature of our engagement is with other people, and mine was in that venue, but we all have opportunities that we spend time and reflect on what happened, and we spend time afterwards and reflect. The pressure's not on anymore. And now we can reflect, I could have said this, I could have said that, and even practice it. And I've done that with my team, where I said, when he raised this issue, I could have said, okay, now here, and I practice it. I say it, I lay it all out, and now I'm ready next time this particular issue comes up. So it's always good to be able to do that, I think.
Yeah.
All right.
That sounds great, Greg. Thanks so much.
All right, Craig. Thanks for the post-mortem, so to speak, whatever. All right, buddy. Bye-bye.
All right, take care.
Okay. Let's go to Paul in Texas, and we got 10 minutes, Paul. Thanks for waiting.
Hey, appreciate it. Thanks, Greg. Just FYI, back in 1987, I prayed a prayer like that, and that's I came to Christ right afterwards.
Oh, no
I just cried out
kidding.
to God and said, "If you're real, prove it." And He did. So,
Good for you. So was that? I'm presuming. I mean, when you say if you're real, prove it. Sometimes that could be a little bit of a tongue in cheek, or yeah, right,
No.
kind of thing. But in
For
your case,
me,
it was completely genuine, huh?
it was life and death. I was a cocaine addict and followed all kinds of bad stuff, and I really had no religious upbringing. Although I had this friend, or maybe more than one, but one particular that I knew was different. And anyway, shortly after that prayer, the next day I got with him, and he brought me to church, and I went forward and
You went forward the very next.
And they gave me a Bible, and I started memorizing Scripture, and just radically got changed.
Whoa! So you went forward the very next day after praying this prayer?
No, that was on a Thursday, and it was a Sunday.
Oh, I see. Well, it was pretty quick. Pretty quickly.
Pretty quick, yeah.
In my case,
it's a longer
it was.
story, but
in my case, it was a number of months.
He delivered me way back when. And by the way, I've been following SDR since the KBRT days.
Oh, no kidding.
And even volunteered for a while with SDR. But anyway, that's I wanted to say too, mention real quick that my wife and I are strategic partners, and we love what you guys are doing. We're real appreciative of SDR all those years.
Well, thank you. I'm thrilled to hear that, and we're appreciative of you. Thanks. So what's on your mind here in the last 6 minutes we got?
Okay, make it quick. Okay, so we have a lot of, I would say, extra-biblical, non-biblical things going on in my church, hearing God's voice, or people hearing from God, spiritual warfare, the generational curses, the authority of the believer, strongholds, just that kind of stuff. And I've, a long time ago, you converted me when I listened to Has God Spoken, and I've read Jim Osman's book, and by the way, he speaks very highly of you in his book, quotes you numerous times if you're not aware of that. But anyway, the question I have now is that we've been in this church for 7 years. We've made a lot of good friends. We feel like my wife and I feel like we're still being a good influence, and we're trying to, speak truth where it's, when it makes sense. Although I think we've annoyed some of the leadership and so on. So when do you leave and when do you stay? That's just, how do you think through that?
It's surprising to me how many times I get asked this kind of question. So these are people that are in churches now, and part of it is kind of a curse of learning, a curse of knowledge of sorts, because when you start learning more things and being more careful about your convictions, a whole bunch of other things become much more obvious in the community you're in. And I understand that. I get it. Maybe this will simplify it. I think there are two general reasons that you are part of a Christian community. And first one is so that you can be fed and shepherded, by the sermon, by the teaching, by whatever, and that you can serve others. So you are going to be able to receive, and you're going to be able to give in that environment. And that has to do with the kind of relationships that you have, the interactions you have with other people, or maybe specific duties that you'll perform for the church. And so those are the key things. Now, some people are at churches, they never get to do anything. Their leadership is very strong-handed, and they don't let release any power to anyone else, okay? I've had different mentors in the churches I've been in the past, and so that's been a good thing to see ministry flourish as leadership allows that to happen, okay? But on the other hand, being fed is really important. And sometimes the meal is a mixed bag, that there is good stuff and then there's some stuff that's not so good. And this is where you're going to just you and your wife will have to make a decision. Are we being fed well or adequately in this environment, especially in light of a number of other things that we think are not sound? Like the hearing from God. By the way, virtually every place you go, you're going to have at least some measure of that. Unless you're in Lutheran circles or Reformed circles, you don't get that much. But certainly other evangelical churches and also, especially Pentecostal style, you're going to get a lot of that. So, everywhere you're going to go, you're going to get some of that. It just depends on how much it influences the life of the church. If the leadership of the church is really given to this, that's a problem, in my view. And my brother used to go to a church where they had to make big decisions for the church, so a bunch of people got together with the pastor. They had a big meeting at the church, and quite a number of them, they're knocking things around, which is great. And then somebody says, well, we've heard from each other. Now we need to hear from the Lord. And so then the pastor said, okay, everybody go home and you seek the Lord and pray and fast, and then we'll come back and you guys, everybody can tell us what you think the Lord is telling you for us. Well, that was the death knell. I mean, that was the straw that broke the camel's back, I think, for my brother. They moved on somewhere else because that is not good advice. And notice how that kind of approach is going to have an influence in the direction of ministry in the church. So that's a big deal. As far as I'm concerned, that is. But and if you got the what did you mention? Generational curses, etc. Now that's a problem too, and I think that's a problem with how they read certain texts, and it is going to affect ministry too. So you're going to have to ask yourself, how much am I actually getting fed? That's good food. It's a good diet, whatever. And how much is the bad stuff undermining us or getting in the way of our teaching or maybe your respect for the leadership or whatever. And there'll probably be a tipping point. Maybe you're at it. I don't know. And maybe it's time to find some other church. My brother right now is he's at a Reformed church now, and he loves it, and his wife love it. They were at Calvary Chapels for a long time, and this particular one I just mentioned wasn't a Calvary Chapel, but there's a lot of these churches that are kind of like that. And finally, he got himself, I think, in a solid church where very good things are happening, and there's very good Bible teaching, and it's a great community, and none of this other stuff going on. So you might want to keep your eyes open for other options, especially if this. Look, if you are calling me about it, it's probably troubling you quite a bit, wouldn't you think?
Yeah, it's public. Yeah. Not that maybe somebody recognized my voice, but you know what I mean. Yeah.
No, I wasn't concerned so much with the public thing. Is that you are motivated enough to ask me my opinion about that? That means, well, it's troubling you quite a bit. And so if it wasn't bothering you, you wouldn't ask me, Yeah. But it does seem like it's getting maybe towards that tipping point, which is why you made the call. Now, you're going to have to make that decision. That's up to you guys, because it is a subjective element. Your comfort level and what the bulk of the teaching is, and the community life for you, and then all this other stuff, which, the hearing from God stuff, and then the generational curses, and that's there are probably more things too that are kind of in that general category that are going on. So that's a decision I think that you guys are going to have to make for yourself, but maybe that's a little guidance that will help, Paul.
Yeah, I think it's, the other things are the things that I think there's so many times people take scriptures out of context and make a pretext, as the saying goes. The last thought, I'll let you go. Thank you so much for taking my call, but I was going to mention this earlier and I forgot to. I think your next book should be called Church Smarts, and you can help churches to deal with all this stuff.
Church Smarts. Well, that's an interesting title. I don't think I have a lot of experience in that kind of area. I already have my last book in play right now, and it's called, working title is Does God Whisper? Of course, my answer is no to that, but I have to cash that all out in a very careful way. And then I think I'm going to be done. I mean, it's going to be 2 years in the process of getting this thing published, so I'll be, 76 in a few months. I'll be 77, 78. Anyway.
You're warming up.
Okay.
You got plenty of...
All right. Thanks so much for the call. Appreciate it, Paul. Greg Koukl here for Stand to Reason. Give 'em heaven, friends. Bye-bye now.